So, hello again, everyone. As you know, my name is Jessie Ellisberg. I'm Program Manager for Youth Action Net at the International Youth Foundation. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this Youth Action Net webinar, which is part of the Living Leadership Series brought to you with support from the Sylvan Laureate Foundation and the American Express Foundation. The Living Leadership Series focuses on highlighting the organizational issues leaders face, as well as the social innovations being employed by young social entrepreneurs from across our growing global network. Today's webinar is entitled Coaching Demystified, How to Coach and Be Coached. Our presenter is Karen Phillips, a program manager here at the International Youth Foundation. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage you all to submit your questions as we move along using the Send Questions to Staff option on the drop-down menu of the chat box, as you can see in the screenshot now. We'll do our best to address everyone's questions during this session. Please also note that the session is being recorded to share with those who are not able to join us today. Now it's my privilege to introduce you to today's presenter, Karen Phillips. Karen joined IYF in 2004, and as the Life Skills and Curriculum Development Manager, she currently leads IYF's initiative to deepen and broaden its life skills offerings through strategic program development, training, and e-learning. Passionate about learning and facilitation, Karen has led life skills and social innovation workshops in Latin America, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East for IYF's Youth Action Net, iServe, and Passport to Success programs. Additionally, Karen has coached dozens of young social entrepreneurs in the Youth Action Net program along their journeys to personal and professional transformation. She is fluent in Spanish and proficient in Portuguese. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much, Jessie, and hello, everyone. It's really my great privilege and pleasure to be here with all of you again today, and with an initiative that's so close to my heart. Given my previous work with Youth Action Net, I'm really just thrilled to be re-engaged with the Youth Action Net team and with all of you today to talk about something that I'm incredibly passionate about and very excited to share with all of you, which is coaching. So, to briefly review our agenda for today, we're going to have a quick overview of coaching and really come to sort of a common definition that will inform the rest of the presentation, and that espouses the definition that I have personally and that the Youth Action Net team uses for coaching. We'll explore 3 coaching techniques and have a little bit of a demonstration of each one. And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how you all could theoretically incorporate coaching into your day-to-day operations, whether with your staff or with your program beneficiaries. Moving on, we'll explore a little bit the idea of if you all need a coach. Some of you may have heard of coaching or explored coaching previously, want to know if coaching is something that you may be interested in or that would work for you. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then present an exciting new opportunity that the Youth Action Net team is offering with an alumni executive coaching opportunity. We'll have opportunities for some questions and dialogue, and go from there. So great, to jump right in, talking about the overview of coaching. Coaching is really based around the core belief that you see here, that individuals are creative, resourceful, and whole. And this is really the cornerstone of the Coaches Training Institute philosophy, which is the institute where I studied coaching training after being so inspired by working with many of you Youth Action Net fellows in coaching through the fellowship program. So the idea is that each individual has the innate potential inside of them. They have that ability to tap into their own internal tools and resources to affect the positive change and to really live the life that they love and that they want to live. And so the coaching helps individuals surface that. We often talk about coaching as a mirror. So a coach acts as a mirror, working with the client or the individual to reflect back to them all of the wonderful positive capabilities and qualities that they have, and maybe also some of those areas where they might want to explore deeper or change. So a coach also serves as the vehicle which can hold the agenda or hold the client's goals in mind. So many of you who have had experience with the Youth ActionNet Fellowship coaching sessions have set your own personal and professional goals. And so the coach's job is to really hold those goals sacred for the client and to hold the client accountable for those goals. And one of the things that I find most interesting about coaching is that there can be just as much learned from a goal that's achieved from a goal that's not achieved. And so it's really about the conversation, exploration, and the learning there. So, really the client or the coachee is accountable for their own development in this case. And we really see coaching as a way that can help shift the stories that we tell ourselves. So all of us have stories that we tell ourselves about certain situations or challenges or people in our lives, and coaching provides an opportunity to step back from that, to sort of get out of your own head, if you will, and look at things from different perspectives, be inspired, and make the change that you desire. Lastly, coaching, where we see it differ from mentoring, for example, because you all may be familiar with coaching or mentoring or have heard different uses or applications of those two words, and certainly out there's many different definitions and variations on those, but in this particular case we see coaching differing from mentoring in that it is focused on the client and it's not hierarchical. So we really see mentoring as someone who's an expert in a certain area or may have more experience in a certain area than you do, giving you advice or connection to resources or resource information or resource people that can help you along your journey. In this case, the coach may or may not be an expert in your particular field of work, but what they do is really focus on you and on the relationship, on the coaching relationship. So these are just some sort of the basic tenets of how we view coaching to make sure that we're on the same page moving forward, and certainly in the question and answer session would be very interested to hear any thoughts and reflections on this from all of you. So now we wanted to jump into exploring 3 different coaching techniques that we feel could be easily applied immediately in your day-to-day lives. And in doing so, we're going to introduce the technique, and then Jessie has graciously agreed to participate in a coaching demonstration so that we can utilize some of these techniques in action. So the first one that we're going to explore is listening. And in coaching, we think about 3 different levels of listening. The first level is internally focused. So this is where you may be in a conversation talking to someone, or perhaps in a meeting, or perhaps on a webinar, and you're having an internal conversation in your own head. Don't forget to pick up the milk at the grocery store. Man, she just was talking about goals, and I realized I forgot to do this to achieve my goals, or whatever it is. This is completely normal. We all do it, coaches in particular. And so the important part in terms of a listening tip here is just to recognize when it's happening and to just let it go. Because the more that you might get upset at yourself for not paying attention or thinking in your head, oh my gosh, I just lost the last 3 sentences that she said, you continue sort of down that rabbit hole of continuing not to listen. So the sort of tip here is to just recognize it and let it go. The second level that we talk about is client-focused, and this is what we use a lot in coaching, and it's where when you're having a conversation with someone else, you're just really focused on that person. And I'm sure we've all experienced that when we're having just a really deep conversation, it's flowing, we're really connected with that person on a deep level, we're really hearing not only what it is that they're saying, but also what they're meaning, and it's incredibly transformative, not only for, in this case, the client, but also the coach. So this is one of the main types of listening that we focus on. The third level is another level that we also use in coaching, maybe to a more limited extent, that is externally focused listening. So this is where as you're having a conversation, you may be aware of other outside noises or sounds that are around you, like the clock ticking perhaps, or the sounds of traffic. And in coaching, something neat to experiment with is how you can pull those into your actual conversation. So you may hear a clock ticking in the background as you're talking with someone, and it may spur you to say, I hear this clock ticking, time is passing by. Where do you see time passing by in your life, for example? So it's sort of a fun and experimental way to incorporate the environment into the conversation or the coaching session that you're having. So as I mentioned here with the listening tips, coaching typically uses levels 2 and 3 simultaneously. So it's really something fun to experiment with. So that being said, we're going to move into our demonstration of listening and start to see those different levels present in our conversation. So just a few tips as you're listening. Try to hear the emotions expressed in Jessie's voice, maybe what it is that she's meaning versus what she's saying. And also any external sounds, although I have to say the latter, we're in such a really controlled environment for the best quality of the webinar. I'm not sure that there will be too many external sounds, so that we might not explore that one so much today, but just something to keep in mind. Maybe on your own end, if there's any external sounds that you're hearing, how they influence what you're listening to. So wonderful. So hello, Jessie.
Hi, Karen.
Great. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, good. Wonderful. So what would you like to get coached on today?
Something I've been thinking about is I've been teaching dance and group exercise classes for a while, and recently had some kind of negative experiences. So I'm sort of wondering where to go from here. Whether I kind of try to continue doing the same thing, or I'm not really sure.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but it does sound like a great opportunity to explore more. Good. So we'll end the first demonstration here, as really we were just setting up the coaching scene and demonstrating listening. And so you may have heard a bit of hesitation in Jessie's voice, a bit of confusion, and uncertainty about where to go, wanting to continue in this endeavor, but not being sure because of maybe some of the challenges or negative experiences. So great. We'll end the demonstration for listening here, and we'll continue on with exploring the second technique of powerful questions. So there are many different types of powerful questions that we use all the time and in day-to-day in our conversations, or that we also use in coaching. Today we're going to focus on one type in particular, which is open-ended versus closed-ended questions. And many of you who are facilitators and trainers and in that space are probably already familiar with this technique, so it will be interesting today to explore it in a coaching framework. And so when we talk about open-ended versus closed-ended questions, we're talking about framing questions in a way that can encourage deeper thinking and that cannot be answered by a yes, a no, or just a nod of the head if you're in person. Closed-ended questions are types of questions that can be answered very simply with yes or no or whatever. So a few examples of powerful questions are, of open-ended versus closed-ended. The first is, do you enjoy your current position? So this is actually an example of a closed-ended question, because you would reply yes, no, or I don't know, or whatever, but it wouldn't necessarily lead to deeper conversation. An example of an open-ended question, though, getting at the same idea, is what about your current position fulfills you? And you can just imagine if someone asked you that question, what the thinking that you would have to do to respond to it, and the broad answer that it would elicit for you as you think about all of the different things about your current position that fulfill you. Even if you're looking for a transition, there's things that fulfill you, and so this question could get at that deeper meaning. So we'll use this opportunity to move into the second part of our demonstration with Jessie, utilizing powerful questions. And as you're hearing the demonstration, listen for the different question types that we just discussed, what Jessie's reaction to those types are, or the different types of answers that are elicited. So we'll return. Good. So Jessie, do you like teaching dance and exercise classes?
Yes.
So what is it about the dance and exercise classes, that really moves you or really fulfills you?
Well, I really like teaching and engaging with people, and particularly with things like dance and exercise, where I feel like it's something that people can enjoy and makes them like healthier and happier.
Mm-hmm. I see. So is dance is something that can make people healthier?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a physical activity, so.
Sure. So you said you like these activities because they make people happy and healthier. How does that fulfill you to know that you're contributing to someone else's health and well-being?
Well, I think it's I like being in a kind of facilitating role. So in a way, even if I'm the teacher of a class, showing people what's possible and that they can, be doing this and that they can actually enjoy it and then become healthier and have a better lifestyle because they're, physically active and healthier. And I think being physically healthier also can make you mentally healthier.
Mm-hmm. So there's something about you being able to spark transformation in someone else that is helpful for you. That is, yeah. And so if you weren't going to be able to do that through dance and exercise classes, how else could you tap into that desire to spark transformation?
That's a really good question. I think, luckily I get to do some of that in my day job, but I don't know if maybe I could find another type of activity to teach or another place to teach maybe.
Great. Okay, well, thank you, Jessie. We'll, again, end the coaching demonstration here for now. We'll take a pause. And, just to sort of wrap up, maybe it was a little bit obvious, but trying to use a different mixture of questions of open-ended and closed-ended. And you could hear Jessie, responding very shortly or curtly to the closed-ended questions, and the open-ended questions elicited deeper thinking and transformation. So, and that's not to say that you can never use closed-ended questions, because clearly you can see that they can help set up and establish a common understanding before you may go into explore different topics more in depth. But it's certainly something you want to continue to push yourself on and challenge yourself, because the open-ended questions, the powerful questions, are what really lead to the deep and rich experience. Great. So we will round out our coaching techniques and our demonstrations with exploring the use of metaphors. And so, as you know, a metaphor is when you compare something to something else, or saying that something is like something else. So the way that we use this in coaching is that it can provide sort of a shorthand in our conversations. It's linking a feeling or emotion to an object or some sort of visual representation, or it can even be something auditory, a sound or a quote, or something that really connects with your client, and it's something that you can use in your relationship as you may continue to discuss certain issues. This can be something you can refer back to easily, and it has meaning, and it can be a reference for both of you. It also can help shift the internal monologue. Sometimes visualizing something in a certain way, perhaps even different than you yourself had visualized it, if your coach is thinking of it in a different way than you are, it can help shift that internal monologue. So a few examples that I've experienced in the coaching that I've received from my coach, and also in the coaching that I've done, so these are real-life examples, is one, it sounds like you have a smorgasbord of options in front of you. And so this particular, just to give it context, this particular case was, I was in a situation where I felt like overwhelmed by having too many choices. And by my coach framing it and giving me this visual, it transformed the opportunities, into a multitude of opportunities in abundance where, really I had the freedom to choose whatever it is I wanted to choose. And so it helped, for me, it was a profound shift. Another example is, look, I can see you climbing up the mountain towards the summit. And so, in this case, a client who felt like they had maybe lost their way, were not achieving their goals, had obstacle after obstacle. For me, the way that I saw that was a mountain. They were going up the mountain, so it was difficult and steep and maybe treacherous, but they were still very much on the path to their goal. And so, these are just some examples of that have been used in real life, but the use of metaphors, I think, is something that's very fun and creative that you can introduce into your conversations or your coaching. So we'll move on to the third and final part of our demonstration with Jessie and look at exploring the use of metaphors. And so for you all who are listening, to try to think of words or ideas that spark a metaphor either for you or that spark a metaphor in our conversation, the development of the metaphor, and Jessie's reaction to that. So, okay, great, Jessie. So it sounded like in our last question that there may be some other options, but actually what I took away from that was you feel like teaching dance and exercise classes is really a profound way that you connect into that part of yourself. Is that true?
Yeah, I grew up with lots of like music and dance and performing arts, so I think having that creative outlet is really something that I enjoy for myself, but then making it kind of useful for other people, I also really like.
So what would happen if you didn't have dance and health and exercise classes in your life?
I'd probably gain weight.
Yeah, that's definitely
might not be as healthy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'd have more free time, but I'm not sure that I would use it very productively.
And do you feel that would there be something that you feel would be missing, some part of yourself that wouldn't that you feel wouldn't be expressed? What part of yourself would that be?
Yeah, I think that the kind of creative part of me and part of my brain that I like to, yeah, I like creativity and I love art, so I think that would be missing.
I see that. So when you were talking about your brain, I don't know, I immediately thought about kind of the right brain, because that's this creative piece, so like almost like it lit up on your face, or you know, is there something about tapping into that right brain, you know, that you can connect with in this scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's sort of, I guess I'm in past years I've had a lot more of like engaging my right brain, tapping into that, and then I, you know, have been kind of off and on, and then in the past year or so was very much more engaging that, and so I realized what I'd been missing, and I don't want to stop engaging that part of my brain.
I see. So it's almost like it's a bright light, like that side of your head is almost like lights up, you know, like if we think of how do we turn on that bright light in your life, Jessie, related to this challenge that you're having.
Yeah, I like that idea, that to kind of keep that fire lit.
Good. Yeah, fire. Exactly. Yeah. So how are you going to keep that fire lit?
Well, there are kind of smaller things I can do, like smaller projects, and maybe other types of performing arts that I could explore as well.
Yeah, and then that's an interesting point. We started out talking about dance, which is clearly a performing art, and exercise, but I felt as the conversation progressed, we were talking about arts more generally as well, or some different images of, gosh, even maybe different art forms like painting, or I don't know, some other types of creative expression are in there somewhere too. Okay, great. So we thank you very much, Jessie, for volunteering to share that personal situation with us for this demonstration. And you know, as you all who were listening, you know, in this last piece, looking for, you know, a metaphor, and you can see the metaphor can kind of develop and change as the conversation goes on. So, you know, looking at the idea of the brain as a reference object, and then moving into sort of a bright light, and then even to the fire, which Jessie related with herself, and those are kind of the most powerful metaphors that your client may develop for themselves. So that will end our demonstration of the 3 different techniques. And, you know, again, just to sort of summarize what we talked about, looking at the 3 levels of listening, the powerful questions specifically around open-ended and closed-ended questions, and then the use of metaphors. So what we wanted to think about as well is, in addition to these different techniques, which, you know, we really do hope that you all experiment with because they're also just a lot of fun and very effective, we wanted to think about how it would be possible to incorporate coaching into everyday project management. And so thinking about how you can use these coaching techniques, or what's often called coaching strategies, in your work. One idea would be to utilize it with your staff, or, you know, within your institution, to encourage in-house talent development. So really looking at either you or engaging the services of an external coach to help tap into that innate potential of each one of your staff members and help them grow within your organization or project so they can continue to contribute and continue to take your project further. For yourself, looking at it as a complement to other management tools or styles. As a manager, you often need to tap into many different types of tools, sometimes simultaneously. So needing to be perhaps a bit directive in one instance, or being more of a mentor in another instance. And having some of these coaching techniques can also be helpful in your toolbox, so that when you want to encourage or support or really help a certain staff member achieve their goals, both personal and perhaps related to the organization, these coaching techniques can be very helpful for that. And, you know, traditionally, coaching has been used to encourage underperformers, although, you know, I think the sector is moving away from that, and you know, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the idea that, you know, perhaps there's staff members who are struggling, or who are not living up to that potential that you really see inside of them, and so providing this kind of coaching support, again, either yourself or externally. And you know, another idea is looking at utilizing these kinds of techniques, you know, with your beneficiaries. So you may be able to use these techniques to help a beneficiary or a program participant clarify their personal or their program-related goals. So you may be working with young entrepreneurs, and using these coaching techniques can help them further along their entrepreneurship journey. It can, you know, these techniques always foster deeper and more meaningful connection, and this is something that's relevant for both, you know, utilizing with staff and potentially with beneficiaries, but helping you to keep the client at the center of your intervention. I know that you all really have those humanistic and focused interventions where the client is at the center, and so these kinds of techniques can help reinforce that approach or technique. So if you're interested in incorporating some of these coaching strategies, some practical or concrete ways that you may be able to do so would be, as we mentioned, as part of your own personal management style, through engaging the services of a certified coach, either for your staff or for yourself, which is what we're going to talk about in a little bit. And again, you know, a certified coach, but also consider engaging coach trainees or student coaches, people like myself who are studying coaching. There's lots of very interesting programs out there, and people who I'm sure would be very eager to work with you and share their coaching skills with you and your staff. It can be a complement to existing program activities, so you may want to formally incorporate a coaching piece, for example, in the entrepreneurship that we were talking about earlier. Have an actual coach that works with the entrepreneurs in addition to any training or loan support that you may be giving them. And it can also be techniques that you utilize in training your staff and volunteers, or that you train them to utilize these kinds of human-centered, very future-oriented, positive types of techniques in their work in your programs with beneficiaries. So these are just a few ideas. I'm sure there's many, many more, and again, something that we'd be curious to explore together in the question and answer session. So lastly, the question that comes to mind often is, do I need a coach? And there was an interesting article recently in the Financial Times of surveying senior executives in different corporations, probably Fortune 500 types, about their perspectives and sort of the shift in their perspectives around coaching. And basically, they felt like it was an extremely valuable space for some of these following reasons, as they continued to grow in their trajectory, feeling more and more isolated. And that may be something that some of you all feel as your organizations grow, your projects grow, you're starting to engage more folks, get to scale. You may feel an increasing sense of isolation as structures get more formalized. You may have started as a group, the initiative, and as it's grown, it's become more formalized, and you may not be getting the feedback or having the constant conversation that you had in the beginning. And so certainly in this article, these executives felt this way. And so what they appreciated about having a coach was that it was a space where they could really reflect. Again, it's this idea of the mirror, the coach being a mirror, so the coach was able to challenge them on some of their thinking and push them further or act as that devil's advocate. So, coaching isn't necessarily all nice and sweet, perhaps that it may have been portrayed in the demonstration that Jessie and I gave, but a coach's role is also to challenge you on tough questions, to recognize patterns in your life that you may not be seeing and to call you out on them, all done in a very loving, goal-oriented way, of course. Again, it's a place to receive this open and honest feedback that I know so many of us crave and often feel like we don't get enough of, ironically, in our day-to-day lives. And coaching can also be a good support when you are personally going through a difficult time or transition, or where you may be leading your organization through that kind of a scenario, and can also give you insights into work-life balance, because coaching, as I mentioned in the beginning, is really about the holistic person. So you may engage a coach for a work-related or organizational-related or professional challenge, but as we all know, all of the different aspects of our life are interrelated, and so coaching can help make those connections and identify really where it is we need to make changes in our lives so that we can live up to our best potential. So I will end my part of the presentation here and turn it over to Jessie, who's going to be able to give you more information about this exciting opportunity that the Youth Action team is offering.
Thank you, Karen. And I'm really pleased to say that starting in January, Youth Action Net will be offering a unique opportunity to alumni as part of its continuing education activities. So for 10 Youth Action Net alumni, they'll be eligible to receive a minimum of 8 hours of executive coaching from Karen, and this will be between January and October. And this is going to be particularly useful for any alumni who are feeling that they're in a place where they are asking kind of what's next, where do I go from here, if they feel like they need to get unstuck. This is a great opportunity for you. And so if you are interested, please get in contact with our colleague Eric Lin, Program Manager with Youth Action Net. His email address is on the screen. It's elin@iyfnet.org. And he'll provide you an application, which is due by January 10th, and then participants will be notified by the 15th. And just a couple of additional notes if you're thinking about whether this is a good fit for you or not. It's for you must be fluent in English or Spanish. Karen is fluent in both, so that's available. And of course, have access to a reliable method of communication for the coaching calls, landline, cell phone, or Skype. And then just really, it's great for people who are willing to kind of commit to at least 8 hours and have an open mind about the coaching process and being really interested in an opportunity for some transformation. As I said, if you want to apply, please get in touch with Eric, and the applications are due January 10th. Great. And then I think now would be a great time to have some questions. And just a reminder as well to the audience, if you do have any questions for Karen about coaching or for me about the coaching opportunity that we have for Youth Action at Alumni, please type your questions into the question box and send that to the staff, and we'll do our best to address everything that gets sent our way. But I wanted to start with one thing. You're talking about kind of what coaching is and the difference between coaching and mentoring, and I think that there are a lot of people kind of blend the two approaches, and they might call it mentoring even if it's really what coaching is, or vice versa. And so I was just wondering if you could speak a little to the challenges of sort of meeting people's expectations if what they're looking for or what they're expecting is somebody that's going to give them advice, but what you're really trying to do is listen and be that mirror, as you said.
Yeah, great question. And you know, there certainly are lots of different definitions, and I think, you know, in some ways it's all semantics. I think it's important to have definitions, as you mentioned, to manage expectations, but at the end of the day, you know, a really holistic intervention, or you know, when you're working with someone, what they really might need you to do is share a piece of information that you have with them. So you know, it's not necessary to be so much of a purist about the definitions, but I think it's helpful, you know, as we are, you know, as you said, managing expectations. And so, you know, in terms of setting that up, you know, typically a coaching relationship will start with what's called a discovery call, or that first initial meeting is an opportunity to not necessarily dive right into the different challenges or issues that the client wants coaching on, but to spend some time developing the relationship. And so I think in that moment, that's where, you know, both the coach and the client can share their expectations, you know, clarify what are some of the norms of the relationship going to be, and really set that out from the beginning. And if it turns out that what the client is seeking is really, you know, a certain skill set or you know, connections or more of mentoring opportunity that the coach isn't able to provide, then that's you know, can be established very early on, and the coach can refer them to another opportunity. But I don't think it, in most cases that I'm familiar with, or at least for myself, it's not necessarily so divided, but the majority is really focused around the coaching or the client accountability and the developing of the client's innate potential.
Great. And when you're working with a client, how do you, like, what are some techniques you use to help them focus? Particularly sometimes if you're talking with somebody and they're kind of, their ideas are just all over the place, and they're really unfocused, or they are in a moment where they're overwhelmed by lots of options, and so their mind is going in a lot of different ways. Like, how do you help focus that conversation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it can vary, you know, depending on the situation. If you're thinking about someone, as you mentioned, who's maybe overwhelmed and frazzled, maybe just even sitting, even if it, you know, in person or on the phone, just sitting in 2 minutes of silence can be really helpful for someone who is, kind of in that frenzied space that we've all been in. Giving yourself permission to take that step back can often be really helpful. A coach is also, as I mentioned, responsible for holding the agenda. So as they may be listening to someone who is coming up with a lot of ideas, as you mentioned, or unfocused and shifting from this idea to that idea, the coach is really able to kind of put the foot down and maybe stop the conversation and pull out one or two ideas that are most concretely linked to the goals that the person has. And in that sense, it's very much the coach's job, as you were saying, to bring them back to focusing on the agenda, to maybe eliminating some of those distractions and getting to the core essence of what the person needs to change in themselves or in their environment to achieve their goals.
Great. And going back to the first technique that you shared about the 3 levels of listening, so you mentioned that for level 1, when you're in this kind of scenario, and if you're working with a client or a staff person or a beneficiary, and you notice that you're doing it, to recognize and let it go, but it seems like that can be very difficult. I mean, is that a natural skill to be a good level 2 or level 3 listener? Is that something you have to develop? And what are some ways that that skill can be developed?
Yes, you definitely have to develop them. And so I think it's just practice. I mean, even it doesn't have to be in a formal coaching context, just in your everyday conversations with people. I know all 3 levels of listening happen to me all the time, and I think as I am aware of them, I can catch myself, even if I'm having a regular everyday conversation with a friend. I'm thinking, oh, I have to go pay my parking, get my car out of the garage, and then I have to go to the grocery store, or whatever it is. I catch myself now, and so I think it's cultivating the awareness and putting it into practice as much as you can in every conversation, not necessarily limiting it to a formal coaching scenario, because I think in several lifestyle blogs that I read, a lot of the authors propose that just improving our listening skills is really the one basic fundamental thing that everyone could do to improve their relationships around the world. I mean, and it's funny because as you think about coaching in particular, you think about something that a coach would need to say or do, but it's actually the fundamental skill, and I think, and that's sort of why we ordered it this way. The first skill is cultivating your listening and receiving. So that's why it's so key.
Great. One thing, we have a question. What is the real difference between a certified and a non-certified coach?
Yes, good question. So a certified, there's an international coaching federation that certifies coaches, and what that really means is that they have gone through a certain number of training hours, that they have coached clients in a certain number of coaching hours, and that they've passed both a written and an oral exams, and then the oral exam is really practice coaching. So that, it's an international set of standards that, as with any kind of professional accreditation, can say to anyone who wants to engage this coach that they have met, these credentials, and they are supported, or this organization vouches for them. In reality, a lot of coaches go through training and choose not to become certified for whatever reason. So, it's important qualification, and it's something that I'm hoping to move on to in my own journey, just because the additional learning and training and skills and connection with other coaches is something that I'm really eager for. But in terms of the experience that you may get in your in engaging a coach, it's really more about your connection to that person. As I mentioned in kind of that discovery call, if you feel like this person is going to be able to really gets you, is really going to help you move forward in your life, achieve your goals, then on some levels the certification isn't as important.
Great. I was wondering if you could give an example from your own process of being coached about how the coaching process has helped in an area of transition, transformation, or growth.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I really came to the studying of coaching and moving into the certification because of my personal experience with being coached by my coach, who is amazing. And I engaged her services in a moment in my life where I was, struggling, and going back to that smorgasbord metaphor example. I mean, that was a real life example for me, where I was coming to a point in my personal life and in my professional life where I had been doing a lot of similar work for a long time, and it was fulfilling, but I felt like maybe there was something more, and and it was really for me. And what's funny, I think, about coaching is you may go in with a certain issue or preconceived notion, but what you come out of the coaching experience with is something so more profound. And so through the coaching, what I really identified was actually my desire to explore this further. And so as we were talking and thinking about different opportunities or scenarios, and I said to her, I said, gosh, I really want to do what you do. And so for me, that was the journey. For other people, it turns out to be something else. And it's really been one of the most amazing experiences that I've had in my life, going on this coaching journey.
Thanks for sharing that. I have one more question, and again, if the audience has any additional ones to add in, please feel free to toss them in. But you talked earlier about the discovery process, initializing the relationship and kind of talking and getting a sense of your client's expectations and how the coaching is going to look. And so that seems like a pretty clear way to start a relationship. But how do you end a relationship? Like, not necessarily that it's an ending for completely cut off, but just like the formal relationship. If you know that you're officially in having this coaching relationship for 8 months or for a year, then what does that transition out of the relationship look like?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think that, interestingly enough, you kind of set that up from the beginning in the discovery phase of when you get to the end of whatever the agreed upon duration of the coaching is, you sort of talk about that a little bit up front, what you want that to look like, and then certainly when you get there, you just check in again and you have a benchmark. So after 8 hours, check in, and really at that point, anything is open. So it could be, gosh, I feel like after 8 hours, I'm really just getting to the crux of my problem or the transformation, and I want to continue. And so then you would, start another conversation with redesigning the relationship about how you want to continue forward. You may decide, with the client, they say, well, I feel like I've really achieved what I want to do. Certainly, coaching can happen in these discrete sort of pockets or tranches, and you agree to kind of stop the formal relationship, but typically, or at least in my experience, continuing via email or whatever, or you can decide just to kind of take a pause or put the relationship on hold, and then maybe engage on more of an ad hoc basis if you might not have a regularly set coaching schedule on a monthly basis or whatever, but you may decide, can I call you or can I send you an email and set up a coaching session with you, whenever I feel like I need to. And so, I don't think there's really any one prescribed formula. Again, it's being true to the relationship that was established between the coach and the client.
If you take that type of relationship and put it into the context of an organization where somebody might be trying to incorporate this as a technique in their management style, where there might be either the relationship's already been established with the person they're supervising, or maybe there's an unexpected change, like supervisors change all the time.
Sure.
So any thoughts about in that kind of scenario?
That's interesting. Well, again, I guess just taking a step back, because a supervisor would need to employ many different tools, not just coaching strategies. I think that what they could utilize is this discovery phase, or as they're engaging with a new supervisee, to maybe it's not officially a discovery phase, or there's certain things that we do in a discovery phase, like exploring values and things like that. Not necessarily have to do that, but really be transparent about sort of the expectations, the different types of support that you as a supervisor may be giving them, focusing on what they need, and in that way kind of designing the relationship so that it's clear that there may be different moments where you have to be more directive, or where you may be more guiding and coaching. Certainly if there's a transition in that relationship, I think as a supervisor, speaking to, if you have the opportunity, whoever would be the next supervisor of that person, and sort of sharing any learnings or insights from the relationship, and then to the extent that it is feasible or makes sense, it's in some cases you may continue more of a coaching relationship with a supervisee even after they've moved on to another supervisor or another organization. So I think in this particular case, using coaching as a very formal word for just really creating a deep and rich relationship with the people who you're working with and supervising, and that can extend beyond the actual work engagement, way beyond that. Mm-hmm.
And for people who are thinking about using this kind of technique either with their own staff or with their beneficiaries, mm-hmm. any advice on how to approach people who might not be open to being mm-hmm. coached, mm-hmm. or to have, be the recipient of this kind of, mm-hmm. these kinds of questions?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe experimenting. I think if you just slip in these kinds of questions here and there in your conversations without formally calling it coaching, you can achieve the same outcome. Really asking a question, and then when someone kind of has to stop and think, like, then you've kind of have a little nugget there to work with. But on another level, in terms of more formal coaching, I think during that discovery meeting, or as you're setting up a coaching relationship, you may find that there's someone who they're just not ready for coaching. They're not in a space in their particular journey where they'll be able to fully take advantage of that kind of opportunity or relationship, and that's fine. But it's probably best not to kind of pursue that too directly or too aggressively, because everyone has their own moments, and there'll be moments in your life when you need coaching, and as you mentioned, in the relationship may end, and then you may go forward several months or years or whatever it is, and then you may find you need coaching again. So it's all about being in that right space in your life where you're open for transformation as the client, and where you find the right coach who you connect with, and that is going to help you along that journey.
Thanks. And for those who want to learn more about coaching and processes and techniques, is there any literature that you could recommend?
Oh, interesting. Well, I would certainly recommend reading the Financial Times article, and the link is here on the PowerPoint. I'm sure we could send that again. That's a kind of a really good overview and more of the corporate or work world. The Coaches Training Institute website has a lot of interesting resources and talks a little bit more about their model. I didn't talk about that so much today, but if there's someone who is really interested in pursuing coaching themselves, that would be a good resource. Those are the two that come to mind. I could certainly, if I think of others or they come across my path, I could send them your way to share with the network. I think that would be cool.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
So I'd like to wrap up by thanking Karen once again for her insight into coaching and the ways that it can be quite a useful technique and process and to consider, regardless of whether you are an executive coach or whether you are managing people or working with beneficiaries. I think it's definitely a great concept to consider for our Youth Action Net community. And thank you for your participation, everyone, and your questions. And just a reminder to apply for the executive coaching opportunity, please contact Eric Lynn directly. And again, that deadline is January 10th to send in your applications. It's a pretty short application form, but the sooner you contact Eric, the better. And we would also like to encourage you to stay in touch with us. To get more information in general, please email yan@iyfnet.org. Of course, visit our website, youthactionnet.org, and check out our social media presence on Twitter and Facebook. And thank you again to everyone, and have a great day.